How prepared are Oklahoma schools, businesses, stores, and churches from an active shooter situation? In light of recent events, it's a question well worth asking. And it's the topic of this week's in-depth discussion with moderator Reese Wetzel and his panel of guests. Reese?
Thank you, Rich. Today we have two guests to join us here on this topic that has really been brought up across the country. We are going to be talking about active shooter situations, and joining us we have Chief Nate Traver with OUPD, and then we have Commissioner Tim Tipton with the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, I want to get right into it. Chief Tarver, tell me a little bit about your initial reaction last Friday night when you heard that there was an active shooter warning on campus.
Well, I was actually driving back from an event in Norman, driving towards home, and an alert came over on my phone. And of course, when I looked at it initially, I'm kind of like, okay, is this real? And so I began to try to get information as best as I could. And at that particular time, the information wasn't there. So I immediately just turned around and headed back to Norman. So it was shock, but the shock set into mode of what's next. So
and we're going to get into what's next.
Yeah.
So, but first I want to go over here to Commissioner Tipton. Tell us a little bit about how OHP got involved and when they got involved in that situation.
Well, of course, we get the notification as well. I will say the notification system worked the way that it should, and multiple law enforcement agencies got that notification. We have a system to where once that notification goes out, our communications system sends it out to troopers, whether they're working or they're off. And so we had troopers responding that were already on duty in the Oklahoma City metro area, Cleveland County, and then as well as troopers who live in the area that were off duty that went, on duty and headed that way.
And what's the system that you use to notify everyone? Is OUPD also on the same system?
The system that OU uses is called RAVE.
Right.
It's a system that can be opted in for our partners, and it's the students and the faculty and staff, they're automatically loaded into that system, and then outside our other partners can opt in.
And then the RAVE panic button is also the system that the state legislature approved about 3 or 4 years ago. So RAVE is available to every school, K through 12 school in the state of Oklahoma. The legislature pays for that. Oklahoma government pays for that. So and the state of Oklahoma uses it. The Capitol Complex employees there use the RAVE panic button app as well. And we've really done a big push. OU and Norman had already been on the system for quite some time. DPS, we've through the governor's initiative, we've done a big push to get that out to every school system. So earlier this year, we were about 40% of the schools were actively using RAVE. I believe we're over 98% of schools, K through 12, as well as different universities that are using it.
Okay, so the training is a little different, I would say probably for universities compared to K through 12 schools. How do you prepare for a situation like this? When you're in a K through 12 school, it's more confined, but you have a massive campus to cover. What is that training like?
Well, we try to get the training out to all of our staff and our students. As they're on board, we talk about the RAVE system and how that works, that they're already loaded into the system and that they have the opportunity to have their parents and their other loved ones sign in on that so they can get those alerts as well. We also have a method where a department or a group can contact the police department, and then we will go out to that entity or go to that section and talk about how to respond in an active shooter or any other emergency type situation.
All right, and Commissioner Tipton, what is some of the training that Department of Public Safety has had?
So active shooter training has been going on for a long time, over 20 years. The chief and I, we've probably all gone through several different iterations of active shooter training. After the most recent event in Uvalde, Texas, from a state standpoint, we looked at it, and Governor Stitt looked at were we susceptible in Oklahoma to the same type of response failures that happen in Uvalde. So we've been addressing that in multiple ways. Part of it is making sure that everybody's on a notification system. You know, the law enforcement response has to be immediate, and like we saw at OU the other night. The other thing is, whether it's students or teachers, faculty, what can they do in the event of an active shooter? They know they've got to have options, and that's where the run, hide, fight system that we've utilized. LSU, Louisiana State University, which is part of the NCBRT. It's part of a consortium of training groups that are funded through federal Homeland Security, and Oklahoma has partnered with LSU to bring the law enforcement response training, and we call it LASER, is their program, as well as Run, Hide, Fight. So Run, Hide, Fight is the companion training for the civilian side to, you know, notifying law enforcement and then doing something that slows that shooter down, causes them to not be able to locate and kill innocent, you know, victims. So that's what Run, Hide, Fight does, and it's really, Run, Hide, Fight is really a mindset training of don't panic, you've got options, we're going to help teach you these options and decide which, at that moment, which is your best option. Do you run, do you hide, do you fight? And while that's going on, at the same time, law enforcement is responding, applying these laser techniques that all of us know, and that's what you saw the other night was, you know, one of the problems in some states is that whether it's a deputy, a municipal police officer, a campus police officer, a state trooper, we want all of them to train the exact same. And you know, last Friday night was a good example where some OU PD officers, some Norman PD officers, some Cleveland County deputies, and state troopers all arrived at the same time. Some of them never met each other, don't know each other, but they immediately, as a team, moved in and started taking action to attempt to locate.
So situations like this bring unity amongst the agencies?
It does, and you got to make sure that the training is all in alignment to where that can happen seamlessly and quickly.
How do you stay on top of communication like that when you have multiple, you know, different agencies coming in? How do you stay on top of making sure you're getting accurate information?
Well, in a situation like that, it's fast moving. The main part of it is, as Commissioner Tipton said, you know, being trained similarly, it gives us an advantage of when those officers get together and they decide they're going to deploy into a building or into a section, we pretty much know what the others are going to do. We know what the mission is. As far as general communications, that's where we have to rely on the ICS system and come to a unified command. We gather, keep components from each law enforcement entity to get there because, you know, I can't talk on OHP radio, but if I have one of the troopers there in that unified command, then that message can get relayed as necessary. So it's all part of training. It's all part of trying to understand and know. And if I can add to something Commissioner Tipton said regarding Run, Hide, Fight, the whole premise behind that is, as he said, you know, to be able to know what to do in a situation like that. But we want people to think about it before it happens. And if you have that mindset of continuing to think about, okay, if this happens, how should I react? And there are different iterations of the Run, Hide, Fight. Some is defy, deny, defend, and move, or something like that. But the premise is all the same.
And I know the Run, Hide, Fight might have been a topic of conversation amongst the students. They were a little caught off guard when they saw that message. Do you think that's a good thing, though, for them to be alert when they see that message and go, oh, this is real?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. All right. Well, next we want to move into kind of what happened on Monday in Louisville, Kentucky. There was a active shooter there at the bank, and the police body camera footage was released. And I want to know what both of your reactions were seeing that footage.
You know, there's been an evolution of active shooters. There's been an evolution of kind of who the threats are, what the threats are, and we've had to, as law enforcement, evolve our tactics and techniques and tools that we use with that evolution of threat. You know, in Louisville, it was a private business, you know, an area of workplace, more of a workplace disgruntlement or whatever, still with a homicidal subject. And if you look at it versus the school shooting in Memphis that most recently happened, even though there's a different motive behind why they're going in, there's a couple of key points that we would probably want to look at. Number one is, were there signs and symptoms that this person was going to do something like that? And were there any failures in communication that this was a potential? You know, most active shooters, most mass shootings, the assailant either tells somebody or posts something on social media ahead of time. So our ultimate goal would be to find that, hear that, get a tip of that, and take, action ahead of time. In both of the latest two active shooters in both Memphis and in Louisville, unfortunately, there probably were some signs.
I know he had left
earlier.
a note.
Right. So the hope would be that just like run, hide, fight, we'd want every faculty member, student, citizen to understand the principles of run, hide, fight, the mindset behind run, hide, fight. We also would hope that they would be educated on, if you hear something or you see something, then say something. And both the state of Oklahoma or individual universities, and I know OU already does this, but have a means that information can be shared with law enforcement to hopefully preempt that type of an event. But once it does happen, that immediate notification to law enforcement, the immediate actions of the citizens or the staff or the faculty in the run, hide, fight, and then the immediacy of law enforcement being able to get there and take immediate action, not delay in their response. And that's where all of those areas are more of a holistic approach. So it really doesn't matter if it's at a school or if it's at a bank or where it is. That's still that whole holistic approach.
So the principles are still the same in
same,
training,
yes.
and you work through the situations as if they were the same.
Absolutely.
You know, the situation with active shooters, especially becoming as common as they are now, there's still some things, we have to unpack. There's some things that we still are trying to figure out how to develop and overcome in those particular situations. One of the things that, people can't forget is the fact that, officers are human. And going into a situation like that, you have to train to do this. The training that we've had in the past had us sitting waiting. We have learned since the Columbine that we need to go in and neutralize the threat. And one of the things that you as a human have to overcome is the fact that you're going into a situation where you could be hurt or killed. So there's a fear factor that people have to overcome. I mean, people forget about that. So training is a good way of doing that, and understanding what your mission is another part of that. So, but there's just components that you can't toss out of that, and how any individual is going to react to that. That's the whole reason why training is paramount for us. We have to go through those motions. It becomes a muscle memory after that.
And to join in on that, you ask about communication, and communication is very important, right? That amongst interagency and all the partners that would show up. But the other thing, and the chief talked about this a minute ago, he mentioned unified command. So having a trained command structure that all responders know about or trained in alleviates, the potential of officers getting there and really not knowing who's in charge. That unified command that was entered into immediately between whether it be OUPD, Norman PD, Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, OHP, and then working together to devise an immediate action plan, and everybody following that plan and moving ahead. Hopefully we avoid the tragedy like we saw in Uvalde of inaction. So somebody's got to be in command, and we need to make sure that command message is sent to the responders, and they know to take action based on those incident objective plans that are laid out immediately.
Well, Commissioner Tim Tipton of the Department of Public Safety, thank you, and Chief Nate Traver, thank you with OUPD. I would like to thank you both for your time and just your expertise in informing Oklahomans about these situations that they might not be aware of.
Thank you.
Thanks.